Welcome back to another episode of Broke Up, Not Broken. I'm your host, Jamie Lima, and founder of Allegiant Divorce Solutions, where we help people prepare for, navigate, and recover financially from divorce. This podcast is your one-stop shop for mastering your life and your finances throughout the entire divorce process. Today's guest is Amy Vincze, a true force in the world of health and wellness. With over 20 years of experience, Amy holds certifications as a massage therapist, nutritional therapist, hydrotherapist, Reiki Master, and what we'll focus on today, some of the work that she does in the world of tapping. Amy has not only used tapping to transform her own chronic health conditions, but she's also helped countless others find emotional freedom through her work and her Soar with Tapping app. Amazing. I want to talk about that too, because we don't get a lot of people on here that have their own app. In a moment when fear, especially around money, can feel paralyzing, Amy offers a powerful, practical tool to help calm the nervous system, clear old programming, and make grounded financial decisions. I'm so thrilled to explore how EFT tapping can support you as you rebuild emotionally, physically, and financially. So grab a cup of coffee or your beverage of choice, buckle up, and let's once again get you personally and financially empowered. Amy, so glad to have you with us here today.
Well, thanks for having me, Jamie.
Yeah, we can go in so many different directions because you have so much experience in the world of self-care and self-help. So where do you think is a good place for us to start?
We can just start with what happens with the nervous system when we get stressed out and maybe how tapping works to kind of neutralize all of those responses.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's huge. And we were kind of talking about leading up in the lead into our conversation here today. And I've shared this on some other podcasts that I've been on myself and also in this podcast. So a lot of our listeners have heard me say this before, but my divorce was super stressful, super emotional, financially challenging, like all the things. And it took me I started the divorce process in 2017. We were divorced in 2018. And believe it or not, it was like 2020, 2021 where I really started to feel the effects of that stress. So it was a good couple of years later where I was like still starting to reel from it. And I dealt with adrenal fatigue and all kinds of chronic stuff that thankfully I've got myself through now. But that you must see that a lot.
Well, first of all, just going through the whole divorce process is such a roller coaster of emotions. It's up and down. It is pulling you in two opposite directions a lot of the time, and you don't know what to think. So I'm not surprised that your body was in adrenal fatigue. And if you didn't have the enough tools to help you move through that in a really healthy way, I'm not surprised that it kind of built up and then over time reared its ugly head again in your life, because that's just how emotions work, unfortunately. Yeah. I've witnessed my sister go through the same thing during her divorce and many of my clients, so I completely understand.
If I would have come to you 3 or 4 years ago, what would you have told me?
I would tell you that, of course, you are struggling. Going through a divorce, no matter what the situation looked like, there is tremendous grief that goes along with that, and probably even self-blame and comparisons and like a lot of behavior that is really triggering for us on such an emotional level. And to be honest, we haven't been given the tools to manage these emotions really well in our culture. We're just, for men, it's like, if you're not angry, then you're weak. And for women, if they show a whole lot of emotion, then they're considered hysterical or on their period or something that's not given any validity. So we're not really encouraged to kind of lean into those emotions and actually feel them. So when we feel them, we make them wrong, or we stuff them away or deny them. We try to put happy emotions on top of it in hopes that it will help us feel better. But really the way to move through those properly is to feel them and to allow them.
Yeah. It's like almost like you just got to sit in it and just feel the feels, right?
Yeah. And to be honest, it doesn't take that long. Like, studies have shown that if you engage with any emotion for 90 seconds, then it starts to dissipate. But we don't do that. We don't intuitively lean into uncomfortable feelings. We run in the other direction. I mean, that's what our bodies and our minds are telling us to do, that this is uncomfortable and I don't want to be in this place. So I'm going to run or fight or, freeze one of those responses, but we don't actually allow ourselves to surrender to it and feel it. And that is the way through it.
So it's better to hit it head on than just to try to avoid it, right? Because I'm going to venture to guess if you try to avoid it, it's like this lurking shadow that never goes away.
That's absolutely correct.
Okay.
Because it doesn't go away unless you actually release it from your body. And one way to do that is tapping, and the other way to do it is feel it. Mm-hmm. And tapping actually does it in both ways, but yeah. So many. I mean, we've been taught to avoid it. Like I said, we've been taught to take that approach of running in the other direction, and that doesn't serve anybody. And that will build up in your system over time. And like you said, it came back to bite you in the butt a few years later. And it does that for most people.
You brought up the concept of tapping, and I know you have the app, and we'll make sure everybody has links to that so they can download it if they need it later. But I don't know how many. It's probably thousands of years old. I mean, I'm a big fan of Eastern medicine compared to Western medicine myself. I mean, I go to a chiropractor and a holistic person, and acupuncture and all that other stuff. But I had not heard of tapping until probably the last 5 years or so. It's probably been around for ages, but can you, for those that haven't heard about it, like myself, like maybe just explain to us what how it works, the concept, and maybe where it fits in?
Absolutely. It's pretty much a triple threat because it combines 3 different modalities. The first of which is many thousands of years old, like you were talking about with Eastern medicine, which is acupuncture. Mm-hmm. So it utilizes the 14 energy meridians found in Chinese medicine. But instead of needles, we're using the percussion of tapping on our acupressure points. It also utilizes cognitive therapy, like traditional talk therapy, where you are actively talking about whatever it is you want to release while you are tapping through the meridian points. And then the last modality is somatic therapy. So when we get stressed in general, we're worried about the past or worried about the future, and we're not grounded in the present moment. And so the act of tapping on our bodies can't help but bring our focus back into this present moment and bring our energy back into our body so that we can be our most powerful and most effective self. But what I want to talk about too is the science that's happening behind the scenes. Yeah. So when we get triggered with an intense emotion, it could be grief or it could be fear about moving forward and making big financial decisions, that sort of thing. What happens is like signals, we get triggered, signals that are up to our brain, but it gets stuck at the stress center of our brain, the amygdala. That gets into fight or freeze mode, and our body rushes with cortisol. Mm-hmm. The amygdala is trying to keep us safe because something feels really stressful and scary in the moment. What that prevents us from doing is making any logical decisions because that signal doesn't make it to the prefrontal cortex where we can make those sound decisions, where we can make logical we can make sense of what's happening around us. It doesn't get to that place. And so we're making decisions from that stress center, which isn't helpful to anybody. So when we're tapping on our energy meridians, what we're doing is sending a signal to that amygdala saying it's okay to de-escalate. De-escalate, de-escalate, de-escalate. It's saying that over and over again. It's removing cortisol from our body 43% faster than if you had done nothing else. Lowering heart rate, it's lowering blood pressure, it's increasing our immune system response, and increasing our happiness. It's doing all of those things in a very short period of time. So that allows us to kind of get into a really calm and peaceful state and then be able to move forward with whatever it is that we're facing, right? Instead of making a decision or moving forward with that stressed mind, that fight, flight, or freeze response, or fawn, then we're making more logical decisions. And we're taking in all the information from different perspectives. And again, being our best advocate in those moments.
So I keep hearing about like, and I just had a conversation with someone yesterday who kind of went through this experience themselves, in their own personal life, and they were having like all these like, similar health issues that I was having, and we were just talking about like how harboring all those feelings, all those emotions, and not going, like having some form of release, right? Like whether it's through tapping or whatever, how it can bring up other health issues, right? One of which is like, it's higher rates of cancer, right? I mean, that's the biggest thing right now. It's like a lot of people that are dealing with stresses. And I would guess, I'm not a doctor, but I would guess stress is a huge contributor to people and like different types of cancer and whatnot, right? So this could effectively help in that respect as well, right?
Absolutely. I mean, 95% of doctors agree that all the diseases and stuff going on in our body is due to stress. And stress is just kind of a umbrella term to talk about what we were just mentioning, the fact that we get into that fight or flight mode all the time. And because what that does over time, if our major systems in our body are shutting down because we get into fight, flight, or freeze mode, that means that our immune system is shutting down. That means our digestive system is shutting down. Mm-hmm. These are major systems in our body that we need all the time. But if we're constantly in that fight or flight mode, then we can't manage the symptoms that we're having.
Yeah. A lot of the people that we work with have such anxiety over the money aspect of divorce, and which is kind of where, the work that we do comes in, and, the real main purpose of this podcast and all the work that we do, to get people educated and to try to help them, as they go through this experience. How would tapping help with some of the decisions that they have to make financially? I presume you've already mentioned some of this, but with, your brain not communicating in the right way and not being able to make logical decisions. But is there more to that?
Sure. Because I think a lot of people come into any given situation with a lot of conditioning. So depending on what their family situation was growing up, depending on what the dynamics were in their relationship, they're coming into it with a lot of conditioning about maybe they have a really low self-esteem when it comes to advocating for themselves and their rights in a relationship. Mm-hmm. They have really disempowering beliefs around their ability to have money in any way, shape, or form, or even manage money in any way, shape, or form. So it doesn't just allow us to get rid of that fight, flight, or freeze response. It allows us to get rid of those disempowering beliefs and fears that create the fear response. So, for example, if you're faced with a client that is trying to advocate for her ability to get a certain amount of child support, but she was born into a family with scarcity. Scarcity is going to be her, let's call it her set point. And so she's only going to advocate to the point where she'll be at a scarce level, but still be able to just get by, just have enough in the bank to do whatever she needs to do on a regular basis. So if we apply tapping to that set point and that conditioning, tapping through the points, talking about how I've always had a level of fear with money. I saw the stress in my family about just the simple task of paying bills and having enough to put food on the table. Whatever it is, whatever their situation is, we work through that and allow her to set that set point aside as being her parent set point, and allowing her to make a choice to create her own set point, which isn't from the place of scarcity, then she's more willing to advocate for herself to have a higher level of child support.
This was going to be my next question, right? We see so many people that are like disempowered because they weren't the quote unquote money person in the relationship, and they haven't, they were never involved in the financial planner discussions, and they may not know what they owe and what they own and all these things. So that this fits right into that.
Yeah. It's so out of the comfort zone, right? For so many women. I mean, what is the percentage of clients that you have, especially women, that come from that place, that dealing with the finances is outside of their comfort zone?
Yeah. For those of us, for those that are listening, that are like in the thick of it right now, like they deal with, custody issues, they've got budgeting issues, they've got court hearings coming up. Like, is there something that they can do in that moment? Like, we don't have to go into a whole, full on lesson here, because I know you don't have the time for that, but I'd love for you to do that, even for me personally. But like, are there like basics that people can use, like just in that moment where they're like, all right, I need to just like center myself for just a moment here so I can get back to like focusing on the task at hand? How does that work?
Absolutely. People can go to my website, and because there are very, very specific tapping points, you can tap anywhere on your body and the same results. So there are very specific tapping points, and they're mapped out on my website or on the app, whatever you want to go to. And there are videos on both the app and the website that will tell you how to go through this process. Okay. There's big, long explanations on my website as well, and videos for how to deal with bigger issues like anxiety or depression or addiction, weight loss, some of the bigger ones that people might not know where to start. But in general, I would just start with whatever you're feeling in the moment, and probably the biggest thing behind tapping is to just honor and acknowledge where you're at. It's not about, like I said, slapping happy feelings on top of really bad ones. It's about honoring and acknowledging the bad ones, giving them their day in court so that they don't stay lodged in our bodies and in our hearts, as we move forward. Because it continues to be destructive on an emotional and a physical level if we don't release it. So it's all about honoring and acknowledging so that we can release it. So just start where you're at. If it's overwhelmed, you can tap through the points saying, I'm just so overwhelmed. I don't even know where to start. I have spinning thoughts in my head and I can't get anything done. My emotions are all over the place. Like, you just start tapping through the points and saying those things over and over again. And just saying them is cathartic in its own right, because most people just have those thoughts spinning in their head and it never gets released from their bodies. That's one of the biggest comments I get from my clients, is that saying the words is so cathartic. And they're even like, God, am I allowed to say that? Can I say that? And really acknowledge that I have these feelings. And the truth is, yeah, because they're there, they're in there. Let's let them out. So they stop hurting us anymore. Yeah.
I mean, I probably should have done that when I asked for the divorce. I mean, like, I remember like when I said those words, like I want a divorce, at that moment, like the weight that was just lifted, like I felt like a new person. I didn't know that, it was going to spiral out of control and be a bit of a shit show after that, but, financially and everything else. But in that moment, I was like, just being able to release that harboring thought that I've been holding on for probably 3 years at that point. That was a big deal.
It's been tremendous.
Yeah.
And the weight and the guilt and whatever else I'm sure you were feeling as a result of even wanting a divorce. I mean, that's a lot to carry for 3 years.
It is. And probably why, I had so many, health issues that, even afterwards, because you're just harboring that for so long. Yeah, I know that you haven't had a chance to, thankfully, go through this experience, and let's hope your hubby stays in line so that doesn't happen. But tell him to listen to this episode and tell him I said he better stay in line. Only kidding. But like, I'm sure in your own life and in the experiences that you've had in other areas of your life, you've had to deal with, moments of like, having to be resilient and dealing with your own personal healing and so on. So for those that are listening, like, what do you wish every woman listening, or even every man listening, because we have, we kind of, it runs the gamut as far as the people that are listening to us, like anybody that's listening, like, what do you want to share with them about those things, like, self-healing and resilience?
I want to share that I think that there are a lot of really great modalities out there. There are modalities that help us manage our stress, and then there are modalities that will help us to prevent stress from happening. And this can be both of those things. It can help us put a Band-Aid on a moment when you're feeling really anxious and you just need to get through your day, you can do a couple quick tapping rounds, and that will get you out of that stress mode and allow you to move forward. But it can also be applied to what I like to call like the root causes. Like we're talking about that set point, that scarcity set point that was created in our family growing up. So it can be applied in so many different areas, including physical things. It's all about just honoring and acknowledging the emotional aspect of who we are, because we're physical, and everybody agrees that we need to take care of our body. We are intellectual, and everybody agrees that we need to take care of our brain health. And we're spiritual, and everybody agrees that meditation and spirituality, whether it's in nature or in a church, in a religious setting, is helpful for us. And we need to start incorporating that emotional aspect to us. All of our emotions are completely normal, whether they're uncomfortable or not. They are completely normal, and demonizing them is not helping us in any way. So it's all about honoring and acknowledging everything that we're feeling, and just starting there, starting with surrendering to the fact that we have all these emotions. And it doesn't mean that there's, it's a defect, a character defect of some sort. It just means that we're human, and kind of surrendering to that.
Yeah. This is what I call the carte blanche segment of our conversation. Is there anything that I should have asked that I didn't, or anything you want to share with our audience that maybe we didn't cover in our chat today?
I would say that everybody has what I would call foundational fears. So whatever symptoms are showing up in your life, whether it's an irrational response to, something that's happening in your divorce situation, or whether it's just general anxiety and really feeling the stress in your body. Everything can be siphoned down to foundational fears. And when we use tapping to acknowledge and honor and neutralize those foundational fears, then it makes all of the symptoms so much easier to get rid of and to manage. So it's not just the symptoms that you're dealing with, it's also the traumas that have created those symptoms. And so just assuming that that is what you need to focus on is probably the thing that I got wrong a lot of my life. And I got wrong with my clients. And now that I know the truth, I always go back to those foundational fears when I can, because I know the impact that those have on everything else in your life.
Tell me more about what you feel like you got wrong.
I assumed that I had a lot of character defects, and I really hated a lot of who I was because of those things. I thought that I was over serious, oversensitive, really like shut down emotionally. And I just thought that those were things that those were just me. And I hated those parts of myself. And I had kind of a moment of clarity around it around 7 years ago, when everything in my life was crumbling, not necessarily a divorce, but I was in physical pain. I was having panic attacks every day. I was about to lose my job. Like everything was shit. And I started applying tapping to, because I just kind of intuitively worked backwards with what was happening in my life. And I thought, well, I know I'm afraid of failure, but why am I so afraid of failure? And I was like, okay, well, that would mean that people would probably judge and criticize me. And I'm like, well, what's so bad with people judging and criticizing me? And then I worked back from there, and I kind of traced it all back to a fear of not being good enough, a fear of like something really being wrong with me. And when I addressed that core foundational fear, then I wasn't oversensitive. I wasn't judging myself as oversensitive anymore. I still have those qualities because I am a sensitive person, but I stopped judging that part of myself as being wrong, and I started accepting it as just being human.
It's amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. I'm glad I had that moment, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I'm glad I had my moment too. It's kind of defined the next chapter of my life, so to speak.
Well, it's when you're
Because,
sitting in all that rubble, right? The rubble of the life that you had created, that you have the opportunity to create something new. Did you kind of have that moment of clarity in some way when you were going?
yeah, I mean, it gives you an opportunity to kind of redefine yourself, right? I mean, I'm always going to be a father. I'm always going to be a employee or an employer, running, my own company. But, a lot of people out there have these like midlife crises, right? But I think it's also, you get to a certain age where you're like, all right, I've kind of lived my life one way up until this particular point. Do I want to stay on this path? And that's okay for a lot of people. Some of us out there are just, I wasn't, I didn't tear up burn down my family and get my red Corvette and, drive around with, some like blonde bombshell, that type of midlife crisis. But it was more of like, I just don't want to stay on this path anymore. I'm like, I'm not happy. It's not working. Mm-hmm. You only have one life to live. So you might as well do your best to change tact. And that's what I did.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is the really courageous moment, being able to kind of be willing to blow everything up so that you can get on the path that you're supposed to be on. Yeah.
It's not easy for sure, but we could do a whole another show on that, but we just don't have time for that today. But I do appreciate you sharing and all the amazing tips and tricks that you've given us. And, I think really just opening up for this powerful conversation. It's been super helpful, tapping in my experience and with, the other self-help things that I've done myself, acupuncture and wellness and that type of thing. I think it's really just a unique way and super accessible tool for us to use in order for us to calm the fear and our responses around money and whatever else that we're dealing with. It's been super valuable to our community and our listeners. So I really appreciate that. So for those of you that are listening that want to learn more about Amy's work and Amy's app, Soar with Tapping, connect with her through TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. We're going to link all of that stuff in our show notes, so you don't have to stop and jot down her info at the moment. We'll make sure you have access to that. And if you're feeling overwhelmed by the financial side of the divorce, always know that our team is here and you don't have to navigate those decisions alone. Visit us at allegiantds.com to get more support that meets you where you are. If this episode helped you breathe a little deeper or feel a little braver, please subscribe and share it with someone who might need it. Until next time, we'll see you again.